Everything you know about turning on your computer is wrong. You press one tiny button, the screen lights up, and a few seconds later, Windows appears like magic. Simple, right? Not even close. What actually happens in those few seconds is one of the most complicated things your computer ever does. Thousands of tiny checks happen. Secret conversations between hardware begin. Chips wake up. Memory gets tested. Files are searched. Tiny programs hidden deep inside the motherboard start working before Windows is even awake. And the craziest part? Most people use computers every single day without ever realizing their machine goes through an entire chain reaction just to show the desktop. It's almost like waking up a giant robot from sleep. But here's where things get interesting. If even one tiny step fails during boot, your entire computer can completely refuse to start. Black screen. Frozen logo. Endless loading circle. Nothing. So today, we're going deep inside your PC to see what really happens from the exact moment you press the power button all the way until Windows finally says hello. And trust me, the middle part of this process is way stranger than most people think. The story actually begins before Windows even exists. The second you press the power button, electricity starts rushing through the computer like water entering a huge empty building. But your computer doesn't trust itself yet. It doesn't immediately turn everything on at full speed. Instead, the power supply does something very careful. It checks if the electricity is stable. Because if power suddenly spikes or drops, expensive components could break instantly. Modern power supplies are smart enough to protect the computer before anything dangerous happens. Only after the power supply says, "Okay, everything looks safe," does it send a special signal to the motherboard. That signal basically says, "Wake up. It's time." Now the motherboard becomes the main character. Tiny circuits across the board start activating one by one. The CPU wakes up first. And this is important because the CPU is basically the brain of the computer. But there's a weird problem. The CPU wakes up completely confused. It has no idea what Windows is. It doesn't know where your files are. It doesn't even know what kind of computer it's inside. It's like a person waking up in total darkness with no memory. So the CPU immediately looks for instructions somewhere else. And this is where one of the most important pieces of software on your computer enters the story. The BIOS, or on newer computers, UEFI. Most people never see it. Some people don't even know it exists. But without it, Windows can never start. The BIOS is stored on a tiny chip attached directly to the motherboard. Unlike Windows, it doesn't live on your SSD or hard drive. It lives separately, so it can wake the computer up before anything else exists. And honestly, BIOS is ancient. The original BIOS idea goes all the way back to IBM computers in the early 1980s. That means parts of the boot process still carry ideas from over 40 years ago, which is kind of insane. Now, the moment the CPU wakes up, it immediately jumps to a special address in memory where the BIOS lives. Think of it like the CPU saying, "I have no idea what's happening, so I'll ask the emergency instruction book." And the BIOS starts checking everything. Is the keyboard connected? Does the RAM work? Is the CPU healthy? Can we detect storage drives? This process is called POST. Power on self-test. And yes, that's why some computers beep when they start. Those beeps are actually error messages. One beep might mean everything is fine. Several weird beeps could mean your ROM failed or your graphics card isn't working. Back in the 1990s and early 2000s, computer technicians used beep codes all the time to diagnose broken machines. But the strange part is, your computer still hasn't even touched Windows yet. At this point, Windows is basically asleep on the SSD doing nothing. The BIOS is still in charge. Now imagine the BIOS like a security guard searching the building for the operating system. It checks storage devices one by one looking for something bootable. Hard drives, SSDs, USB drives, sometimes even DVDs. And here's something funny. If you've ever accidentally left a USB stick plugged in and your computer suddenly refused to boot properly, this is usually why. The BIOS got confused and tried to boot from the wrong device first. But eventually, the BIOS finds what it's looking for. The bootloader. This tiny little program is incredibly important because it acts like a bridge between the BIOS and Windows itself. Without the bootloader, Windows can exist perfectly on the drive and still never start. It's like owning a car without keys. Now, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the hidden world inside your computer, consider subscribing because we explore weird tech mysteries like this all the time. Anyway, this next part is where the magic really begins. Once the BIOS hands control over to the bootloader, the computer finally starts loading Windows into memory. But not all at once. That would take forever. Instead, Windows loads itself piece by piece very carefully. First, the Windows kernel wakes up. The kernel is basically the core of the operating system. It's the traffic controller for everything your computer does. Apps, memory, storage, drivers, USB devices, everything eventually talks to the kernel. And this part happens incredibly fast. Modern SSDs can read data so quickly that Windows 11 often boots in under 15 seconds on newer computers. Some high-end machines can do it in under 10. But older computers were very different. If you used a PC in the early 2000s, you probably remember startup times that felt endless. Windows XP machines with slow hard drives could take over a minute just to become usable. And during that time, you'd hear the hard drive making tiny scratching noises. That sound was a physical metal arm moving across spinning disks searching for data. Modern SSDs have no moving parts, which is one reason computers today feel dramatically faster. But this is where things get even stranger. While Windows is loading, it also starts waking up every connected device one by one. Your mouse, keyboard, graphics card, Wi-Fi chip, Bluetooth, speakers, webcam. Every device needs a tiny translator called a driver. Drivers tell Windows how to communicate with hardware. Without drivers, your computer would be chaos. Imagine trying to talk to someone who only understands dolphin noises. That's basically what hardware would feel like without drivers. And this is actually why new graphics cards sometimes need driver updates. The hardware changes, and Windows needs better instructions to talk to it properly. Now here's something most people never realize. Startup programs are also sneaking into memory during boot. Discord, Spotify, Steam, antivirus software, cloud syncing apps. All these little programs jump into action before you even touch the desktop. That's why some computers feel slow immediately after startup. The PC isn't just loading Windows anymore. It's loading dozens of extra apps too. In fact, Microsoft once found that startup software was one of the biggest reasons Windows PCs slowed down over time. And honestly, this is one of the easiest ways to speed up an older computer. Disable unnecessary startup apps, and boot time can improve dramatically. But wait, there's another hidden trick modern computers use that almost feels like cheating. Fast startup. Windows introduced versions of this years ago to make booting seem faster than it really is. Instead of fully shutting down, parts of Windows quietly save themselves to disk before power turns off. So next time you start the computer, Windows can partially reload old information instead of rebuilding everything from scratch. It's kind of like pausing a movie instead of restarting it. And this is why some PCs boot unbelievably fast today. But there's a hidden downside. Sometimes fast startup causes weird bugs because old information gets reused when it shouldn't. Certain driver problems and update issues can happen because the computer never truly performed a full clean shutdown. Which explains something a lot of people have experienced. Ever notice how restarting your computer fixes problems better than shutting down and turning it back on? That's not your imagination. Restarting usually forces a cleaner boot process. Now here comes the part most people never think about. Security. Modern computers are extremely paranoid while booting. And honestly, they have to be. Hackers discovered years ago that if malicious software infects the boot process itself, it can hide underneath Windows and become incredibly hard to remove. These are called bootkits. Some are so dangerous they load before antivirus software even wakes up. So modern systems introduced something called Secure Boot. This feature checks digital signatures during startup to make sure important boot files haven't been secretly modified. If something looks suspicious, the computer can actually refuse to boot entirely. And this became especially important after major malware attacks in the 2000s and 2010s targeted startup systems. But this creates a weird situation. Your computer doesn't even fully trust itself anymore. Every startup is basically a giant security checkpoint. Now let's talk about one of the strangest moments during boot. The login screen. By the time you finally see your password box, your computer has already completed thousands of operations. The CPU is working, RAM is active, drivers are loaded, the graphics system is running, networking services may already be connected, Windows is mostly awake. But not completely. The moment you log in, another wave begins. Your personal settings load. Wallpaper, desktop icons, saved preferences, browser sessions, cloud accounts, background apps. And if you've ever wondered why some computers show the desktop immediately but still feel busy for another minute afterward, this is why. The computer is still finishing hidden tasks in the background. And here's a crazy real-world example. Large companies with thousands of employees actually spend huge amounts of money trying to reduce boot time, because if a worker loses even 1 extra minute every morning waiting for a slow computer, multiply that across thousands of employees for an entire year. That becomes an enormous productivity loss. Summit departments even measure average startup times across entire offices. That's how important boot performance became. But there's still one final twist in this story, because technically, your computer never fully stops booting. Even after you reach the desktop, Windows continues loading services silently. Updates check in the background. Security scans begin. Network systems initialize. Cloud syncing activates. Some modern operating systems continue background startup work for several minutes, which means the boot process is really more like layers of awakening. And honestly, that makes computers feel a little more alive than most people realize. A machine that slowly wakes up, checks itself, protects itself, finds its memory, recognizes its hardware, verifies its identity, and only then lets you inside. That tiny power button you press every day triggers one of the most complicated chain reactions humans ever designed for ordinary people to use. Millions of lines of code, decades of engineering, 40 years of computer history, all happening in silence before you even open Chrome. And the funniest part? Most people never think about any of this unless something goes wrong. A black screen suddenly appears. The BIOS freezes. Windows refuses to load. And suddenly, everyone realizes how mysterious booting actually is. Because under the surface, your computer is performing a carefully choreographed startup ritual every single time. And now, the next time you press that power button, you'll know the truth. Your computer isn't simply turning on. It's waking up an entire digital universe, step by step. And honestly, that's pretty incredible. If this video changed the way you see your computer, subscribe, because there are thousands of hidden systems inside the technology we use every day that almost nobody talks about. And once you start noticing them, you can never unsee them again.